to start, I like to start with a morning melody. And
Mm.
I'm not going to use cartels today, just suave, just nice, you know. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Well, welcome, everybody. Um, I just want to say from my own perspective that it would be so wonderful for us to have a question and answer class with Manunatha Maharaja, in the month of during the month of October. So before we begin or be talking about the Srimad Bhagavatam, discussing it today, I just want to put a request out for anybody who's listening and has interest to please send some questions through the chat or personally to Manonatha Maharaj if you wish, but with the request that he indeed come to a class and speak to us about the answers to the questions. Of course, ideally, anything that we want to know about this particular chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam that we are reading would make excellent question material. So, having said that, I'm going to find the blessings. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesh Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yutama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Vayam tuna vitri piyama utamashloka vikrame yatrini vatam rasajranam svadu svadu pade pade. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed the taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing of his pastimes at every moment. Thank you. Having said that, let me find the verse in my Srimad Bhagavatam, this wonderful book given to me by my brother, godbrother Govinda Prabhu, when I was in San Antonio, Texas, for my first initiation. Okay, are we up to text 16? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 16. Mana svabud yamalaya niyamya kshetra jna etam ninayetam atmani. Atmanam atmaniyanarudya drito. Labo pasantir viramela kritit. Sorry for my Sanskrit, and also that my vision is also leaves me short. But we'll go straight into the translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. Okay, we'll go into the purport. The functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. When the mind is materialistic or absorbed in material contact, it acts for material advancement of knowledge, destructively ending in discovery of nuclear weapons. Wow. But when the mind acts under spiritual urge, it acts wonderfully for going back home, back to Godhead, for life in complete bliss and eternity. Therefore, the mind has to be manipulated by good and unalloyed intelligence. Perfect intelligence is to render service unto the Lord. One should be intelligent enough to understand that the living being is, in all circumstances, a servant of the circumstances. Every living being is serving the dictates of desire, anger, lust, illusion, insanity, and enviousness, all materially affected. But even while executing such dictations of different temperaments, he is perpetually unhappy. When one actually feels this and turns his intelligence to inquiring about it from the right sources, he gets information of the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Instead of serving materially for the above mentioned different humors of the body, the living entity's intelligence then becomes freed from the unhappy illusion of materialistic temperament, and thus, by unalloyed intelligence, the mind is brought into the service of the Lord. The Lord and his service are identical, being on the absolute plane. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, and thus the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendentally. When the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire, and when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure, unalloyed state, the living being attains the stage of full bliss, laptopashanti, and ceases all material hankerings. Repeating the translation. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. So this is, well, I hate to start by saying this is more of what we've been reading up until this point, because I don't want to go back over all of those other verses, but we can see, that obviously if the yogi is to merge his mind into, his contemplation of the supreme being through entering maybe into his own self and find the super self within himself, as all of the methods that here have been described. If one fully devotes themselves to this act, let's call it an act, it it supersedes all other activities. I mean, once one decides, wow, I'm totally going into Godhead, then other activities are left behind. I mean, this would appear to be obvious. This would appear to be obvious, except that the living entity very often chooses not to devote themselves totally into the process, and is going back and forth, which we discussed this last week also, between the attraction of the material world and the attraction of the spiritual world. So our process, well, I mean, there may be some people who one day are like this and next day they're like that, but most of our processes are a little bit like this. Back and forth and up and down. They're getting there, because obviously if we would just totally do it, we would just totally be there. But for whatever reason, we choose not to do it. Perhaps the same reason that we chose not to stay with them in Godhead, and maybe we drop to the material world just to satisfy our desires or whatever. So, well, having said this, now I open the discussion for whoever wishes to go next.
Well, I'd like to hear commentary from Mother Lavanga since she wasn't here. But before she says anything, I just would like to just appreciate how eloquently you expressed the the message, Yamuna. I think it's very nicely said. So thank you. And thank you also, Mother Lavanga, for joining us, even from, I forgot where you said you were, but even though you're with your family, you're still making it a priority to come. I really appreciate that.
I know I'll always try to come, and thank you for it, unless it's impossible. But I have a very large family, so it's difficult to do it inside. So I apologize for the very low lighting on my porch. But anyway, yeah, I was thinking about what Yamuna was saying, how sometimes our devotionals like this, and it's making me think like about myself because I often have I notice myself I have that problem, like with devotional service kind of going like this, especially when I get a really big challenge. And I'm like, Krishna, why is this happening? Like, okay, I know I have to suffer my own reactions of my past misdeeds, but like I don't understand. Like, what do you want me to do? Why is this happening? And so it's difficult actually to have this like one pointed um focus that the Bhagavad Gita says and the Bhagavad Gita talks about is really easier said than done because the Maya is so strong that sometimes Maya just gets you like right right where it hurts. You have all your plans and you have things that you want to do, and then like boom, something happens. And you're like, okay, Krishna, I guess you want me to go in another direction. Right now, I really don't want to go in another direction. I like going in this in this direction, and so um, that's kind of how my life is being kind of right now. I have some plans, and I'm hoping I can stick to them. But there's challenges that come up, and so to really trust Krishna. I mean, it's sometimes super easy, and sometimes I notice how it can be very difficult. So there was this one thing in this purport that I was thinking about as you were talking about that, where it says every living entity, every living being is serving the dictates of desire, anger, lust, illusion, insanity, and enviousness, all materially affected. And it made me think how really how we can't get out of this role of being servants at the end of the day. Like you was so nice expressing how some people don't want to fully dedicate themselves to the process. But still, even when we don't, we're still having to serve something. So if we're not serving Krishna and his desires, we're serving, our own desires, our, the dictates of anger, lust, and whatnot, like it was saying here. So, regardless, we're going to have this role of being a servant. And if we can get to the point of being fully Krishna conscious, then that role can be very blissful. But when you're not, when the times when it's more difficult to be in this consciousness, then you really suffer, which is, in one sense, the Uttama Adhikari, they'll see this all as Krishna's energy, and they'll think everybody is serving Krishna better than me, because even if they're serving the external energy, that's still Krishna's energy. However, we know as conditioned souls that are kind of being woken up a little bit that really you had to stay in this association of sadhu sangha, and you had to like keep practicing no matter what, because Maya sometimes will get you, right where it hurts, and that sometimes is what makes it difficult for us to 100% dedicate ourselves to the process. It's like when you have, like one cut on your skin, maybe the rest of your skin is fine, but you have one cut and somebody just digs into that and you're like, ow, So sometimes Maya will get us like right where our attachments are and that'll hurt. So yeah, during those times when we get tested, we have to, even if we don't feel like it, keep going, keep chanting, keep staying in Sadhu Sangha. So this is my realization on what Yamina was saying.
Hi, very nice. Um, well,
Mm.
I'd like to comment on what uh, everyone else was speaking on too. I think though I would just go into what was striking for me was just Prabhupada's choosing of the word unalloyed was striking for me, and just how it's brought up, how he used it to translate Amalaya, 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 Amalaya. He translates that as unalloyed, unalloyed intelligence, and then in the purport he also brings about the word unalloyed again and again. And then if I look it up, the definition basically just means pure. So when he's talking about unalloyed intelligence, he's talking about pure intelligence, and that pure intelligence being uh, being merged into the Lord. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, where our intelligence, our capacity to think and have ideas, where all the purpose of that is just to have more and more ideas of how to please Krishna and how to please his devotees. And that's where our intelligence is going. I'm reading right now the book Salted Bread. It's about the devotees he's from Armenia. They got the experience with the USSR and the Soviet Union and going into the prison camp. And I haven't gotten that far yet. I just started the book, but um, just seeing like through the devotees' experience of our intelligence and the use of like sense gratification, and how prior to trying to practice the spiritual life, we're still utilizing our intelligence, but it's in a way to get more and more satisfaction, get more satisfy our senses more and more, whether it's like our gross senses, like our tongue, or we want to hear something, or I mean, like there's drugs, you want to have that kind of physical sensation, or also it could be like a subtle thing where you're wanting to think and have these different kinds of ideas, so you're subtly pleasing your mind and getting satisfaction in that way. And so our intelligence is going a little crazy. It's like going from one thing to another thing and having ideas for this and having ideas for that. And what Prabhupada is talking about here with unalloyed is where it's fixed on one thing. And in my experience, uh, being in like a householder life, having a full-time job, having a wife, having two children, and all these outlying factors and things and responsibilities, the the need for that kind of fixed concentration to be fixed on like one thing is the need for it, and the importance of it is coming more and more, and how much peace that brings when we can bring our intelligence and our mind to be fixed on one thing, where it's not going all over the place. Because if we're not peaceful, as Prabhupada says, where how can we be happy if there's no peace? And so as we're practicing, we're bringing that peace to our mind. And it's starting here with uh our intelligence, as Shukadev Goswami is talking about. He's saying that the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence. So the mind, it's not that the mind is merging by itself, it's merging by this intelligence being fixed on Krishna. And Guru Maharaj speaks on this point many times, that to work with the mind and try to steer the mind in the right direction, it takes like a strong intelligence, and that strength comes from its purity. So if our intelligence is pure, and we're understanding now, we're really really understanding now where to put where to put that capacity to think, where to put that capacity to understand and come up with ideas. And it's in Christian, and it's in devotional service. So the more we really see that, then the more peace we have, and the more we're able to go deeper into our spiritual life. And as we're going deeper into our spiritual life, then the more fixed we can be to stay on the path. So even when we are going here and then going there and going here and going there, which I experience as well, then but we don't go too far. We may go, over here, but it's like in bowling, you have the bumpers. So if you put the bumpers up when you're bowling, the ball's not gonna go in the gutter anymore. It's gonna still stay in there, but you are hitting the bumpers, but you're staying within the space. And so even though we're going back and forth, we're not straying too far away. I feel like I brought up many points. So I think this is a practice for me to be more concise. But these are points that I wanted to bring up.
I like your oh sorry, I like your example about like how like the bumper cars going back. You know, you're hitting the line there, but staying, you're staying within the lane. So that's a really good example about devotional service. You know, just not giving up. In some ways, not giving up. It's like we're staying in the path, even if we're going here. You know, the devotees come, the sadhus come, and they bounce us back in line. We go
Yeah.
over here, there's bounce us back in line. So that's a really good example.
I heard a nice example, or I don't know, analogy, where one devotee said that Krishna consciousness, like going into Krishna consciousness, is kind of like he said it's kind of like joining the mafia. Once you're in, you can't come out. Krishna doesn't let you come out anymore. The devotees don't let you come out anymore.
It's true, we know too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that it's true in many communities, maybe not in all communities. In some communities, they don't seem to care very much whether or not the devotees stay in close association. But that's neither here nor there. I think we should go on to the next text 17. Mother Lavanga, would you like to read that?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up here on my phone simultaneously while being on Zoom. Okay, I think so. Okay, text 17. All right. Nayatrikalo nimisa para paramu kuto nudeva jakatami ya ishire. Nayatra satvam narajastamascha navai vikaro namahan pradhanam. In that transcendental state of Labdopasanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods, who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves? Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. Purport. Devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods by its manifestations of past, present, and future, does not act on the transcendental plane. The influence of time is exhibited by the symptoms of birth, death, old age, and disease. And these four principles of material conditions are present everywhere in any part of the material cosmos, up to the planet Brahmaloka, where the duration of life of the inhabitants appears to us to be fabulous. Insurmountable time even brings about the death of Brahma. So what to speak of demigods like Indra, Chandra, Surya, Vayu, and Varuna? The astronomical influence directed by the different demigods over mundane creatures is also conspicuous by its absence. In material existence, the living entities are afraid of satanic influence, but for a devotee on the transcendental plane, there is no such fear at all. The living entities change their material bodies in different shapes and forms under the influence of the different modes of material nature. But in the transcendental state, the devotee is gunatita, or above the material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Thus, the false ego of I am the Lord of all I survey does not arise there. In the material world, the false ego of the living being trying to lord over the material nature is something like a moth falling in a blazing fire. The moth is captivated by the glaring beauty of the fire, and when he comes to enjoy it, the blazing fire consumes him. In the transcendental state, the living being is pure in his consciousness, and as such, he has no false ego to lord over the material nature. Rather, his pure consciousness directs him to surrender unto the Supreme Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Vasudev Saram Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurabha. All this indicates that in the transcendental state, there is neither material creation nor the causal ocean for material nature. The above mentioned state of affairs is factual on the transcendental plane, but is factually revealed in the transcendentalist knowledge of the advanced state of pure consciousness. Such transcendentalists are of two types, namely the impersonalists and the devotees. For the impersonalists, the ultimate goal or destination is the Brahmajyoti or spiritual sky. But for the devotees, the ultimate goal is the Vaikuntha planets. The devotees experience the above mentioned state of affairs by attainment of spiritual forms for activity in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. But the impersonalist, because of his neglecting the association of the Lord, does not develop a spiritual body for spiritual activity, but remains a spiritual spark only, merged in the effulgent rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is the fully fledged form of eternality, bliss, and knowledge, but the formless Brahmajyoti is simply eternity and knowledge. The Vaikuntha planets are also forms of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and therefore the devotees of the Lord, who are admitted into the abode of the Lord, also get bodies of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. As such, there is no difference between one and another. The Lord's abode, fame, entourage, etc., are of the same transcendental quality, and how this transcendental quality differs from the material world is explained herewith in this verse. In the Bhagavad Gita, three principal subjects have been explained by Lord Shri Krishna, namely Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But one can reach the Vaikuntha planets by the practice of Bhakti Yoga only. The other two are incompetent in helping one reach the Vaikuntha lokas, although they can, however, conveniently take one to the effulgent Brahmajyoti as described above. So, I'll read the translation again. In that transcendental state of Ladabhashanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods, who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves? Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. Okay, so before I say something, I just wanted to mention that my battery is on 10%. So I'm gonna speak, and then if I get cut off, you guys know I didn't leave you on purpose. I checked for an outlet around here, but apparently there's not one outside for the charger. So anyway, but with this verse, what I'm getting is that it's explaining the difference between the material and spiritual natures. So Prabhupada would say sometimes, how can we know where we want to go unless we've heard about like what it's like? How can you know that you want to go to the spiritual world unless you've heard about it? So he gave the example like somebody who's been to California. They tell you what California is like. Oh, California has nice mountains, nice oceans, um, whatever else California has that's really nice. And by hearing, people think, oh, yeah, okay, I want to go there. How do I get there? And they get a map. So in this verse, we're hearing about the difference between the material and spiritual worlds. So in the spiritual world, there's no such thing as really time, or there's no such thing as birth and death, things like that, disease, old age. It's all non-existent. And so in the spiritual world, the thing is one is able to render service without limitation. And that's the difference between the spiritual world and the material world. The material world, we're always limited. Even if we're trying to do something good, like serve our families, serve our community, we're always going to be limited by death, by disease, or something of that nature. So by hearing about this spiritual world, okay, it's a place where we don't have to worry about disease, we don't have to worry about death, we don't have to worry about old age, all of that. Okay, it sounds very nice, but how do I get there? And that's where Prabhupada comes in and he starts talking about the two types of spiritualists, the impersonalist and the impersonalist. So, and this is really important because generally in the broader scope of what we call Hinduism, even though we're not Hindus, most people are impersonalists, or most people, when they get into spiritual life, they're impersonalists. So they'll take some impersonal meditation. But that can only really lead you, as Prabhupada is mentioning, to the Brahma Jyoti. And so in this Brahma Jyoti, you get knowledge and you get bliss. And now you get knowledge and eternality, but you don't get bliss. And that's why one gets very bored, because they want some type of activity. And also, that's why Prabhupada mentions in the end that the Bhagavad Gita talking about Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, but the only way to get to the Vaikuntha Lokas is Bhakti Yoga. So the Bhagavad Gita, we see that Bhakti Yoga is sandwiched in the other yogas. You know, the 6 through 12, chapter 6 through 12, they talk about Bhakti Yoga, and they're sandwiched in by the other two chapters. The first chapter is Karma Yoga, and then you get to the Bhakti Yoga section, then you deal with Jnana Yoga, which sandwiches in Bhakti and it protects it. So the cream is in the very middle. So this is Prabhupada always brings his purports back to how really what you want at the end of the day is to go to the Vaikuntha Lokas, or even go further beyond that, go to Goloka Vrindavan. Because in this stage is where one is actually going to get this knowledge, bliss, and eternality. But we're hearing that without without going there, you can only get some partial spiritual realization. So this verse, Prabhupada does an excellent job of describing the nature of the spiritual world, so we can keep that in mind. We can meditate on that it's a place of where you don't have to deal with the modes of material nature, always competing for you, always fighting goodness, passion, ignorance, trying to get control over you, influence your desires and things like that. You don't have to deal with disease. You don't have to deal with death. You don't have to deal with old age. So you think, okay, how do I get there? And that's why Bhakti Yoga is mentioned at the very end. And I am appreciating that point so much, that really in the Bhagavatam, in so many verses, we hear about what the spiritual world is like and what it's like to have a spiritual body, so that we know ultimately what we're striving for and what we're going for. Sorry about that. They just turned the light off. They don't realize I'm out here. But I'm gonna stop right there. You guys can go ahead. I had to tell them to turn the light back on. One moment.
Okay. I don't know, Mother Yamuna, if there's anything you'd like to say.
Well, I think that well, I think the point well, I think this thing about time, about devastating time, I think it's the role of time in of all of existence. I think that that could use a bit more of explaining, you know. But here time is referred to as devastating, so I guess that's the saying the negative effects of of time can be gotten over. You know, this is if there's no mode of material goodness, nor passion, or ignorance, or even the false ego, you know, um, this is you know, this is just going back to Godhead basically, you know, because you know, when we're in the material world, we're totally tied up in the whole time thing. And birth, death, old age, and disease, you know. And well, I don't know what else to add to that. Govinda, you can say something?
Sure. Yes. Yes. I mean, um, yeah, when Mata Luanga was speaking about death and how in the spiritual world there is no death or disease, there was I mean, maybe like an emotion or some kind of connection, something connecting with that where we hear it. I mean, I've heard it many, many times that we're not these bodies, we don't die, we're spirit souls, and you go into the spiritual world and there's no death, there's no disease or old age. And maybe it's due to my own contaminated mind and intelligence, and that there's this, I guess, like a level of cynicism there. So that if someone is telling me about this spiritual place where all these things that are true for where I am, that where I am right now, there is death. I hear about it. I mean, not every day, but every, you know, it seems to be happening more regularly now, where a coworker or family member or someone that I know knows someone that has passed, that has died, that has left their body, and that's kind of coming in more now. It's coming. It's coming. It feels like it's coming closer in a sense where it's happening around me, and so being around that and knowing that this is here, if you know, hearing it and reading about that in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha Lokas and Goloka Vrindavan, there is no death, there is no disease. It's just to really make that connection and to really have faith in that and to really strive for that takes, it seems, at least to me, it seems to take a level of purification of some kind of obstacle. At least for me personally, there's something internally having to get cleaned out to really um, believe that, really believe in that, and really be fixed in that, and really feel like this is actually true. This is actually something that I myself can experience. It's not make believe. It's not a story. It's not a fairy tale, but this is actual. And I heard something so beautiful from a devotee giving class, giving class here in Alachua. She was giving the Bhagavatam class, and someone had brought up a question about time. Right now we're reading third canto. We're in it's all of the technicality about material nature. It's kind of like what we're reading here in the second canto, except times 10, it feels like. Third canto goes really, really in depth with like really detailed things. But I don't remember fully the question, but the Mataji, her response to the question was emphasizing that actually the spiritual world is reality. That's real. That's what's real. And where we are, this is an illusion, that this is not the reality. This is like it's not false. It's not like this is imagination, but it's like temporary, you know, that this is an illusion that just doesn't last. And that actually the spiritual world is what is real, that that's actually what's reality. And right now, as I am reflecting and thinking about what we're reading and speaking about the spiritual world, it's like flipped for me, where this feels like real and the spiritual world is almost like illusory. And so um just having that understanding that that's why we have to continue reading, that's why we have to continue talking about it and repeating until so that we can, at least me, I can get it through my thick head that you got it, I've got it backwards. Mm. So, and I wanted to just point out something really quick. I don't know if anyone wanted to comment on that point, but I just wanted to share a little where Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he talks about how in the material world, the false ego of the living being trying to lord it over the material nature is something like the moth falling in a blazing fire. The moth is captivated by the glaring beauty of the fire, and when he comes to enjoy it, the blazing fire consumes him. And then in Bhagavad Gita, immediately this I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but this image came to mind. I don't know if you can see that one. It's the one where it's got like all the stairs, and then it's like the
Yeah,
Jiva.
I see it.
Yeah. And then it's like up here, here's Radha and Krishna. But we're getting pulled down this way. We're that moth getting pulled down into it says ignorance, anger, envy. And it's like we're captivated by her, but we're really getting pulled down by these other guys over here with the chains on us. So yeah, but we don't see them. We're so ignorant and so in illusion that we can't even see the ones who are really pulling our chains.
I appreciate I didn't want to interrupt you, Prabhu, but
No, that's it. That's it.
I appreciate your point about how, you know, sometimes we can feel like this is the actual reality. Like this is because we hear about the this place where there's no birth, there's no death, and how there can be this skepticism there. And I've experienced that too myself. And I think what helps though is that in Krishna consciousness, we get these glimpses, like these small glimpses that, okay, Krishna's really like there for me. Krishna's real, like we have this amazing experience at a festival or during kirtan, our reading, we get some realization, or Krishna shows up in like some unexplainable way. And so sometimes because we get these types of glimpses, we can see, okay, well, if this is true, then this could also be true. And we can understand that just like there's things that we can't experience, with our limited senses and in this body, even there's things in this world we can't experience. So we had to somebody told me once, so we can think of the spiritual world as like it exists, but on a realm that I can't experience yet. Just like if, like they turned out the lights a few minutes ago and I couldn't see, but there's creatures out here that can see just fine in that darkness. So I could think, well, in the dark you can't see, but it's not that one can't see, it's that I can't see with the current eyes that I have. So with spiritual senses, one can realize all of this. But I appreciate your point too about that's why we have to keep hearing, because that's how we develop the spiritual senses.
Hare Krishna, that's a very good point. The point of that, how can we even understand? I mean, oh, we lost her. Well, Govinda, how can we even understand if we can't experience it? Like, for instance, in the spiritual world, uh, will we be like eating? Will we be living like we live in the material world? How can we escape from disease, etc., if we're doing things? I mean, we can't imagine what would we be doing in the spiritual world that we're not doing in the material world. We can't even imagine that, because the things that we do in the material world, of course, are the things that lead to disease and etc., etc. So, how, in what way would our lives be different that this wouldn't be happening to us? Would we be blessed that we could do anything and nothing will happen to us, or there's no more consequences anymore? I mean, this is a valid question. This is something that might make one a little skeptical about the existence of a realm where there is no consequences and anymore, that we've evolved so much that now we're perfect human beings or perfect spiritual beings, and we don't we no longer will need to suffer any more consequences, except if we do it to ourselves and decide we want to go back down to the material world. Right? What do you think of that, Govinda?
Yeah, I mean, the consequence that I thought was that one that you mentioned, that there, at least that I can think of at least one consequence, and that one consequence being that you're no longer able to be there anymore and you're having to come to the material world. So that being a consequence. Aside from that, I don't know. I mean, I've just heard this is where I guess this is a motivator for me to read more descriptions of the spiritual world. That's the nice thing for us, that we can at least read descriptions of it. Um, in other practices, there's not any kind of literature or anything to really give you an understanding about where you're going or where it is that you're wanting to go. But at least for us, we have literature, like a vast amount of literature that actually can explain to us and illuminate what it is that we can expect to find there. Um, but as far as no consequences, I don't know. I mean, I would think that you could just eat if you really wanted to. You could eat whatever you want, and
You can have
you're not,
all the sugar you want.
yeah, you're not gonna get
All
diabetes
this,
or
yeah.
any high cholesterol.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have all the
Well,
fried foods. You could
I
eat.
don't
I mean,
know. I don't know about that.
Krishna himself eats just straight butter, like just
Yeah.
concentrated butter.
Yeah.
Probably no, there's nothing unhealthier or more unhealthy than just that, but
Well,
he does. Yeah, so I mean, if Krishna can do it, then if
so yeah, that's a good question, is what is our activity actually in the spiritual world? Do we eat and sleep, and do
yeah.
we, partake in some of the activities that we partake in the material world? Maybe
Hmm.
that's a good question for Manonatha Maharaja. Yeah.
That'd be a beautiful class if he could give us a
Yeah.
class on like
Yeah.
descriptions of, yeah, yeah.
Well, having said that, and having lost the third participant, because I think she ran out of charge on her telephone and she hasn't come back. I think, it being 9:34, we could leave now, even though we did start maybe 10 minutes late. But uh, I don't think there's a point in starting another text right now. I think we've done two for today, 16 and 17, and next week we'll begin with 18. with Lavanga leading, I believe. Well, I'll send her a reminder.
Okay.
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 All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to be in your association. Let's remember to thank Manunatha Maharaja for giving us this opportunity to discuss the Srimad Bhagavatam together. And let's thank his spiritual master, who is the spiritual master of all of the devotees, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai. Thank you very much for leading today's discussion.
Thank you. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.